On the evening of September 26, 2012, inside a dimly lit hotel in Monrovia, Liberia, three men sat around a small table. To anyone passing by, it might have looked like an ordinary business meeting. But in truth, this was a trap, a carefully staged event months in the making. Hidden cameras captured every movement. Outside, undercover DEA agents waited. What Paul Le Roux didn't know as he confidently leaned into that table was that his empire, built in secrecy, fueled by technology, and stretching across continents, was about to collapse. Paul Le Roux. The name alone carries an almost mythical weight among law enforcement circles. He was not the kind of crime boss who strutted through clubs with bodyguards at his side, nor the type to leave a trail of violence behind him. No. Paul operated differently, quietly, invisibly, and from behind a computer screen. He was a ghost in the machine, a man who turned lines of code into an empire worth billions. For years he lived in the shadows, manipulating global markets of drugs, weapons, and even mercenaries, all without ever showing his face. And yet, on that September night, the ghost became flesh, and the most elusive mastermind in modern criminal history was finally unmasked. But to understand how it all came crashing down, we need to go back to the beginning. Paul Le Roux was born in South Africa in 1972. As a boy, he was fascinated by computers. While most kids played outside, Paul spent endless hours teaching himself programming. By the time he was a teenager, he was fluent in multiple coding languages. He wasn't just good, he was gifted, the kind of mind capable of building systems far ahead of their time. But Paul wasn't interested in Silicon Valley dreams or becoming the next Bill Gates. His ambition ran darker. He saw technology not as a tool for innovation, but as a weapon. Where others saw opportunity, Paul saw loopholes, gaps in the system ripe for exploitation. By the late 1990s, Paul relocated to the Philippines. For a man looking to vanish, it was the perfect hiding place. Corruption was rampant, border checks were lax, and money could buy silence. And so began the empire. It started innocently enough, an online pharmacy selling prescription drugs to American customers without prescriptions. To the average buyer, it looked legitimate. But behind the screen, Paul was learning how to bend international law, how to hide transactions through shell companies, and how to build a network that couldn't be traced. Soon pills turned into packages, packages became shipments, and shipments grew into something far more dangerous. Weapons smuggling, cocaine routes, money laundering schemes that crossed multiple continents. Paul discovered he didn't need guns or armies to control the underworld. All he needed was code, encrypted servers, and offshore bank accounts. He could run an entire empire without ever leaving his computer. He became a phantom CEO, his fingerprints nowhere, his presence everywhere. And as the money poured in, so did the lifestyle. The shy coder transformed into a kingpin, mansions by the sea, luxury cars. A private yacht he named the Texas Star II, used not only for pleasure but for moving drugs and weapons under the noses of authorities. He began surrounding himself with mercenaries, hackers, and cartel connections. To his men, he was both genius and tyrant, a man capable of paying millions one moment, then ordering violence the next. But empires built on shadows don't last forever. For years, the DEA, Interpol, and Europol struggled to pin him down. They knew his operations spanned the globe, but Paul was always one step ahead. Until in 2008, a breakthrough came. A bank in Hong Kong reported suspicious transfers tied to shell companies with strange names. Southern Ace, Lotta Trading, Rainbow Power Technologies. These weren't random businesses, they were the arteries of Paul's empire. The trail, once invisible, now had a faint glow. Law enforcement began piecing together the puzzle. The Philippines was a hub, Brazil became another. His online pharmacies were generating billions, but his shell companies stretched as far as the Netherlands, Panama, and the US. Slowly, the image of Paul Le Roux, the ghost programmer, was coming into focus. And then came the mistakes. His men started slipping, Couriers were caught with shipments that didn't add up. Associates were arrested with fake IDs and burner phones. One of his trusted lieutenants, Ronald Barut, was stopped in the Philippines for something as trivial as stealing a motorcycle. Inside his bag, police found documents that laid out Paul's network in shocking detail. What should have been a minor arrest turned into a goldmine for investigators. The dominoes were beginning to fall. By 2011, Paul sensed the net tightening. He shifted base to Brazil, hoping new shell companies could mask his tracks. But paranoia had set in. He moved constantly, changing countries, identities, even businesses. Yet the bigger the empire grew, the harder it became to control. What once ran like a flawless machine was now sputtering. Betrayals, leaks, and sloppy mistakes threatened to undo years of careful planning. Finally, in 2012, the DEA made their move. Using an informant from inside Paul's own circle, they lured him to Liberia with the promise of a lucrative drug and weapons deal. To Paul, it was just another transaction, another step in his grand vision of control. But the hotel room in Monrovia was no ordinary meeting. Hidden microphones, hidden cameras, and undercover agents turned it into the stage of his downfall. The moment Paul sat down, the trap snapped shut. Liberian police stormed in. Paul resisted, tried to close his laptop, even attempted to bribe his way out. But this time there was no escape. He was dragged out, flown across the Atlantic, and placed in U.S. custody. Yet even in capture, Paul played a different game. On the flight to New York, he made a desperate offer: his cooperation. He would confess, hand over passwords, reveal networks, and continue running parts of the empire. Not for himself, but for the DEA. In exchange, he wanted one thing: not to die in prison. For 2 years, Paul became one of the most valuable informants in U.S. history. Under DEA supervision, he helped entrap members of his own network, giving investigators access to layers of the underworld they had never reached before. It was the ultimate twist, the mastermind of a global empire now helping dismantle it from within. But the story didn't end with redemption. In 2020, after years of cooperation, Paul Le Roux stood before a U.S. court. His crimes, drug trafficking, arms smuggling, money laundering, human rights violations, were too vast to ignore. The judge handed down a 25-year prison sentence. The once invisible Kingpin, who once commanded billions, was now just another inmate locked away in a system he once believed he could outsmart. And yet, questions remain. Was Paul truly the sole mastermind behind it all? Or was he a cog in something even larger, a shadow network that still thrives today? His empire may have fallen, but the methods he pioneered, using technology as the backbone of global crime, continue to inspire criminals worldwide. Paul Le Roux was not just a drug lord or an arms dealer or a hacker. He was the blueprint for the digital age of organized crime. A man who proved that the world's next great criminal empires would not be built with bullets and blood, but with code and keyboards. And that leaves us with one haunting question. If Paul Le Roux could build an empire this vast, this powerful, from nothing but a laptop, who out there is doing it right now, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the world to catch up?